Having worked on a number of World Cups, and I can certainly say this about the last one in Russia, where England had this fantastic run, that myself and my colleagues spent an awful lot of time thinking, God, I wish I was in England.
Today we're here at Wembley Stadium, the home of football, with Tom Skippings, UCFB's multimedia sports journalism lecturer, and we're going to be talking about Qatar. Tom, any good memories from Wembley?
Well, I've had lots of great times here working here. I'm a Crystal Palace season ticket holder, so that's alienated the audience straight away, or some of them. But so not many happy times as a fan here, because we usually come here for cup finals and lose to Man United. But otherwise, yeah, I mean it is the place to be. I mean, wonderful games here. Euro '96, I was here watching games. Obviously that didn't work out in the end, but yes, I mean just memories you never forget. Yeah.
So the tournament itself is taking place November, December. Obviously splits the season right in half. What implications do you think that will have for the domestic leagues?
Well, it's an interesting one. I mean, it will create a whole sort of two-season environment, I think, really. I mean, whereas, there'll be a charge through the first half of the season. I mean, where it will get interesting, obviously, is how it affects the consequences it has come next March or April, when players are starting to run on empty, because apart from having a domestic season, they've also squeezed in a month of travelling and playing in a major tournament in a completely different environment. So that is obviously going to have a fairly major effect on the season. Once again, as a Palace fan and a supporter of a club of that ilk, that might be quite interesting. I think if I was a Chelsea or a Liverpool or a Man City fan, I might be thinking somewhere down the line my superstar players, instead of winning me the league, are going to run out of steam. So I think that could be a really interesting sort of end to the season, certainly.
So on that point then, do you think it might be a season for your Palaces, your Leeds, your Leicesters, for another title charge 5,000 to 1?
I think that's a long shot, but I think it is a season, and certainly from Palace that's a very long shot, but I think it's a season where there is likely to be an unusual look to the season. I think that, and I think what's interesting in this transfer window, and you may have a different view on this, it seems to me that clubs are accumulating players, that there's a lot of fairly frantic squad building going on to guard against the particular specific nature of this season, because I think big clubs know that they are going to run, they are going to have stretched resources come sort of the early part of the new year when that all starts to kick in. So I think it could throw up something different. In the end, I suspect that Man City, Liverpool, Chelsea will be in the top 3 or 4, but there might be an element of somebody coming through, because, as I say, the season will run to November, and then it's a question of who picks up quick again when it starts again on Boxing Day. I have no doubt that in the end, the tournament will look broadly like a FIFA World Cup now tends to look. It is a fairly corporate, commercially structured look that gets dropped into a country, in a way that, for instance, the Russia World Cup, we were expecting something different. In the end, it looked broadly like any other World Cup, and I suspect that Qatar will have that element. But the background to it is going to be very, very difficult for people to really sort of accept, and that's not going to change. In the end, football fans will embrace it and they will watch it, but of course, it won't be the same kind of event. Fans won't be travelling in anything like the usual numbers, because of the restrictions that they'll face when they're there.
That brings me on nicely to the next point. So in terms of the fans then, we're used to summer, shorts, t-shirts, beer gardens, that type of thing as England fans, like we've all seen the videos. So how will it differ being in Qatar, being in the middle of winter? I mean, you've covered World Cup yourself, you've seen how mad England fans go, and all countries really. It's great. They bring their colours, they wear their yellows, they're bright, like the Brazil, Sweden's, you get the African teams with their bright colours. It's brilliant. So how do you think, in Qatar and here in England, how do you think fans will react?
I think it'll be a real challenge, and I think it's once again, it does slightly chip away at the whole sort of experience. I mean, having worked on a number of World Cups, and I can certainly say this about the last one in Russia, where England had this fantastic run, that myself and my colleagues spent an awful lot of time thinking, God, I wish I was in England. I wish I was there experiencing it, because we saw the pictures of the fans back home, how they reacted to the run to the semi-finals and everything else, and that is part of the experience. And clearly that this coming World Cup, as you say, will not have that element if we're playing games in early December where we're not outside, for instance. So
yeah, I'm not looking forward to wearing a big puffer jacket
No,
going into the
no, exactly.
into the crowded pubs.
exactly, yeah.
That'll be fun.
Yeah, exactly. It's just not the same experience. And also, a World Cup, it's the anticipation of it. It comes at the end of a domestic season. I mean, sometimes that affects performances because, as we know, England have sent teams to tournaments and they don't deliver because they're exhausted after the domestic season, and they won't necessarily have that excuse this time. But yeah, it's part of the structure of a football season. As you finish a domestic season, then you've got the international tournament to look forward to as a fan, and that's been surrendered this time.
Mm-hmm. So in terms of, you've mentioned it before, March, April, May, players might have burnout. Your Liverpools, your Man Cities, you've got these probably going to have between 15 to 20 players at the tournament. What do you think will happen as a consequence of the sort of month and a half, whatever it is, break in the middle of the season? At the end of the season, what do you think will happen?
Well, I think I think that the club, as I say, I think clubs are accumulating squad strength to counteract that. I think that even more than is generally the case, the cup competitions get tossed away. I think that if you're a major club and you're looking to contend for the title or a top 4 place, you will have to sort of sacrifice those elements. I think we'll see interesting squad selections as the season unfolds. Once coaches start to understand who's burnt out, who can still keep going, whatever. I mean, I think it's difficult to feel too sympathetic for the modern footballer for all the reasons that we all understand. But I do think that this particular season will place an awful lot of stress on these athletes, and we will see injuries, we will see unusual results, and I think it could make it one of those curious, interesting seasons. I mean, as a neutral, Leicester's season is unforgettable. What a fantastic event that was for football fans who aren't involved. We may get something like that again, but it will be different. Certainly.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, it's the same for all managers, isn't it? I mean, some will have more players off and stuff, but in terms of the break, it is fair. I think everyone's got the same break in between the middle of the season. It's just something that's never been done before. So yeah, just got to see how it plays out, really.
Yeah, I think it's been structured reasonably well. They've organised the season reasonably well. But what it means is that everything is truncated. The World Cup itself is tighter, so they're playing games closer together. Obviously, the Premier League season is tighter. Champions League group stage is much tighter. That's all played much quicker. So there is, it's a point that coaches and footballers make. There's less recovery time, and that will lead to injuries, and that will lead to surprising outcomes, I think. But football will survive it. It will come through it, and the World Cup will happen, and there will be misgivings about it, and it will have a strange footnote, I suspect, in football history in time to come. My hope is that, as a traditionist, if you like, that football returns to the usual model from here on in.
Well, on that point, then, obviously Arsene Wenger's come out and said he'd like a World Cup every 2 years. Which, for me, I think if it's not broke, don't fix it. So I'm well of that thought. But do you think we'll see any more disruptive competitions like the European Championships, like the World Cups, coming in and breaking up the season?
I really hope not. It's interesting, Arsene Wenger. I mean, I obviously interviewed Arsene Wenger a lot over the years, and he was a real admirer of his, fantastic coach. But all the way through his career at Arsenal, he talked about the demands of international football, the pressure that it put on his players. He was, and now there is a really different sort of perspective coming from him. I don't think there's real traction for a World Cup every 2 years. I don't think that the game really wants that. I think football has to decide what's important, and I do think international football is under threat from the enormous power of the European club competitions and the concentration of the financial benefits of that. And football needs to protect itself. I think international football has a place. It's hugely important to the normal fan. But as I say, its concentration should be in that summer tournament that is a shared experience for fans to enjoy.
Brilliant. So then the last bit, this can just be one word answers. Predictions for the World Cup. So let's start with winners.
Well, if you had any knowledge of my skill as a predictor, you would ignore all of this. I think one of the South Americans, either Brazil or Argentina, will win it. I think.
Long time coming.
Yeah, I think it could be a final send-off for Messi. I think Argentina are my tip for that.
That'd be a draw.
Yeah.
football fans support Messi these days
Yeah.
rather than clubs, so that'd be a
Absolutely.
dream send-off, wouldn't it?
Could happen.
Okay. England.
I was worried after the Nations League, but they looked exhausted. Haven't got that excuse. Semi-finals again.
Wales.
Good chance in the group. Having England makes a real difference because that creates a real buzz around that game, and they will live for that. And the group's not bad. They could get out of the group.
Make it any further, or last 16?
I'd be surprised. Last 16.
Yeah. Okay. Overachievers, like sort of surprise package.
I think it's hard to know because of the environment. I mean, it's obviously they're not playing at the summer because it won't be 50 degrees, but it's still going to be warm. I think Senegal might do all right.
Sadio Mane
I'm
leading
quite
charge.
impressed with them in the AFCON. I know the AFCON got weird with so many
Yeah.
penalty shootouts, but they might be a dark horse.
I had Uruguay. 'Cause, I mean, Suarez and Cavani are coming to the end. They've got
Yeah,
Nunez.
so for similar reasons. I mean, Uruguay always punch
Always.
above, don't they? And as you say, in those tournaments, yeah, possibly.
I just hope we don't come up against Uruguay. It's just, bad.
Yeah, yes,
Yeah.
there's history there. And
Suarez knows how to
Suarez will
finish us,
always
yeah.
do us if he can. Yeah,
That's it.
yeah.
Disappointments.
I don't know. I think France might be.
Got the World Cup curse.
Yeah, might be. And their last group of games looked. There's a sense of a collective sort of slightly over the brow altogether. Teams can, as a group, get old or get past it. I'm not
Their
sure.
depth is
I'm not sure you can
crazy.
say that about Mbappe because he's 21 or whatever. But they've got players like him. But I just wonder if there's coming to an end of a cycle there that it
Big
might.
pressure as well.
Yeah,
being the winners
huge
and
pressure.
coming into it.
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. So that would be the best I can come up with for a shock.
And then lastly, do you think the Qatar World Cup in 2022 will go down in history as a success?
I think it will go down in history as a tournament unlike any others. My fear in a way is that in the end, as I said, it does just look like every tournament, and that from the perspective of the watcher at home, which is what we'll all be because we won't be travelling necessarily to watch it as fans, that it will just look like any other football tournament, and in a sense it won't leave that much more of a legacy. I mean, having said that, you hope that the football is what it's all about and that it becomes enjoyable from that sense. But I think the important thing is that everything around it isn't forgotten. The history towards its creation isn't forgotten, and how it's got that controversy surrounding it shouldn't be forgotten.